In this video, I'm going to explain the elevations. If you go to your project browser and go down to elevations, open up one of your elevations. I'm looking at the south. You notice that I've already defined the elevations for you, and I'll explain these numbers to you in this video. This is from this video transcript. I show here a concrete wall, foundation wall, and a concrete footing. It'll be poured in place. Wet concrete will be poured into these wooden forms. And what determines the height of this footing, even though I specify a 1 foot high footing, in actuality, the contractors will use lumber to create wooden forms. And they'll just go to Home Depot and get a piece of lumber, and the standard 2x12 lumber is not actually 12 inches wide, it's 11¼ inches. I believe I've shared this with you before. This is a chart of the typical lumber sizes. 2x lumber, 2 inches, 2x2, 2x4, 2x6, all the way down to 2x12. They're referred to as 2x12, but in reality, the actual dimensions of the lumber is 1½ inches thick and 11¼ inches wide. So the contractors will use that lumber here, and that'll determine the height of the footing. And likewise, this wall will also be poured concrete, and they'll create wooden forms. I'm assuming here that they'll use similar type lumber, 2x12. They'll use 3 of them, and then they'll use a 2x6 up here on top to create the height of 39¼ which I need. And I'll go over that in the next drawing. So they'll create these forms, pour the concrete. Once the concrete solidifies, they'll pull the forms away. As far as this wall height, they could use some other material. They could have used plywood, but being practical, you don't want to force them to have to cut lumber to size to meet a specific wall height. You'll just use the standard dimensioned lumber. What I show here are the elevations in Revit. You can see this is the bottom footing, the top of the footing, and this is the grade, and that's the top of the foundation. And all of these 3 are determined by the size of the nominal size of lumber. This is also from the transcript. I show here the foundation wall and the flooring and a sheet of gypsum board. So we've talked about the bottom of the footing, the top of the footing. The grade is where it is. Its grade is 0, 0. And then the top of foundation. What determines the height of this foundation wall actually has to do with the depth of this drain pipe. The drain pipe for your sewer line, will actually be sitting on your footing. It will not be going through the footing, or it will not be sitting underneath the footing. It will actually be sitting right on the footing. Generally, the depth of this drain pipe is determined by code, and it has to be deeper than the frost depth, the depth at which soil freezes during the winter. And in Sacramento, we don't have to worry about freezing soil. But in being practical, you have to bury the pipe a certain depth so that you don't accidentally cut it with a shovel or whatever, hit it with a piece of mechanical equipment. So you want to bury it, and I showed here being buried a foot deep. From here would go out to your city sewer main, and it would be a quite steep slope going out to the main. But at this depth, right next to the house, I show it 12 inches deep. Once you've determined that, what determines the height of the foundation wall is the depth of your crawl space. Now, in the project, I'm specifying a minimum of 24-inch depth, and that's typically what would be used here in Sacramento. And so that would determine the height of your foundation wall if you're trying to keep your floor 24 inches above the grade, above the soil. You want a crawl space underneath your house so you can crawl underneath and do repairs to your pipes. On top of the foundation sits your typical 2x12 wooden joist floor, and then a 1-inch plywood decking, which is actually 1 1/8 inch thick. And that determines the thickness of these two, determines the first floor level in Revit. And then the last elevation, the top of plate, is actually determined by the standard size of a gypsum wallboard. The wallboard has to cover the entire inside of the wall. It's a fireproofing material. So it has to cover the entire wall, so it would go from your plywood decking all the way to the very top of your roof. That's where your top plate would be. And so the location of that top plate is actually determined by this gypsum board. And the gypsum board comes in standard 4 feet by 8 foot sheets. That's 96 inches. And so 96 inches off the level of your floor would be your top plate.